Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next show. I'm going to have State Representative Gary Beard. Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Pleased to have on the show today Representative Gary Beard. He is a state representative for the Baton Rouge area. Gary, we just got whacked by 2 major hurricanes. Let's talk about what you've seen.
Well, the tours that we've made through South Louisiana, especially through the New Orleans and Jefferson Parish area, showed the true devastation that has hit the people of Louisiana, especially in those areas. And of course, the storms as a whole have affected our entire state, not just those on the Gulf Coast. Living in Baton Rouge certainly is has exemplified.
Blessing at this time, isn't it?
Yes, a tremendous thing that's going on in our state, and an opportunity for great things for the future.
It's interesting. I've heard both you and Jay Darden use that word opportunity, because this is a tragedy, and yet it really is kind of like the phoenix bird. The ashes, from the ashes will come a new creation, hopefully.
Hopefully, if we use wisdom and we take the time to really look at this situation, I feel that we can gather together some of the brightest minds, architecture, engineering, planning, and not to build, to rebuild, so to speak, New Orleans, but to build anew, to build a new Orleans, and take the time to build a new Louisiana. And I think that's what we need to do.
And probably never have a chance like this again, certainly in our lifetimes. I hope not.
No, in fact, I think we should do 2 things. One, make a supreme effort to be good stewards of the people's money, because ultimately that's where the money comes from, the people of this
Interestingly, though, and I've really thought about this, here's the whole Gulf Coast, which comprises, 5 states, and yet we're going to receive billions of dollars potentially from the other 45.
That's correct.
Which is really interesting.
For years and years, Louisiana has been what's classified as a donor state. And now, for the first time, and as long as many people can remember, we will be the recipient of those tax dollars that come from the people of this nation, to build something that could be quite glorious, and I believe will lend itself to be a great foundation for the future of our state.
I love the optimism. It's encouraging. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit, though, because we got the former director of FEMA, Michael Brown, on television testifying to the United States Senate that we have a dysfunctional state and local governments here. What's your view? Is he right or wrong?
From the standpoint of our local government here in Baton Rouge, I'm quite pleased with the way they have taken the authority that was given to them by the people and used it wisely and implemented it to great plan. I have heard stories over and over, as we all have, about the failure of the levees, the failure of the pump stations, the failure of the evacuation plan. Truth of the matter is, we have a failure of leadership in our state.
Where?
Unfortunately, I believe it starts at the top echelons of our state government.
So you're talking about the Governor Blanco?
I think from the governor down, there has been a failure to act, and to act decisively, and to provide the leadership that not only the people of Louisiana need, the leadership that the people of Louisiana deserve.
Well, specifically, where have the failures occurred? You say there's been a failure in decisive decision-making. What should have been done quickly that wasn't done?
Well, I think from the very beginning, we knew that the problems that existed with a hurricane of that magnitude coming into the Gulf of Mexico, coming into the state of Louisiana at that point in time, at that geographic location, we knew the magnitude of what could happen.
In fact, Brown, the FEMA director, was very pleased that he had this mock Pam hurricane come through. I mean, everyone knew this was going to happen.
Everyone knew, and unfortunately, the troops were not called into place as far as our National Guard. The state police were not put in proper position. The plan that we had, whether it was good or bad, was not implemented. And we see over and over again a failure of leadership to act decisively and in a timely manner to provide for the needs of the people of Louisiana. And after the hurricane, we still see chaos in our government that cannot meet the needs as situations arise. Now, we all understand that this is something that it was so catastrophic, and we hope and pray that it would never happen again. Yet at the same time, we should be wise enough to say, in case it does happen again, we will have a plan in place, and we will have the mechanisms in place and the leadership in place to implement those plans in a very orderly and a very timely manner. So even today, as we're trying to move forward, we see obstacles placed in path, bureaucratic obstacles in some cases.
Well, let's talk about FEMA. What were your observations or dealing with FEMA?
The same thing in a federal level that we saw at the state level did exist in some circles of FEMA.
Just paralysis of decision
No,
making?
I think it was, well, in some cases, you have to realize that the request for federal assistance has to be just that. It has to be a request.
Why is that?
Because the federal government isn't going to come in and do something in a state government unless you ask for it.
And let's explain to the folks why. The bottom line is every single of the 50 states of the United States are independent, sovereign entities.
The sovereign state of Louisiana can make a request for the troops to come in.
So the federal government cannot impose its will on the state unless
the federal government could nationalize the Guard, as they did in Alabama, as you know, in the 60s. They could have done that. But in this particular case, an emergency that we knew was forthcoming, the request had been made, very clearly made, by state officials, and we know now that that request was not made. So that part, as you know, was a failure. And then after the storm hit and after we recognized there were several problems that were beginning to occur, and as problems were coming up, we couldn't get action from certain aspects of state government to implement a plan to, in some cases, save people that were down there. In other cases, as you know, of saving supplies and resources that we had stored in those areas. And other things had to take place in order for those goals to be accomplished.
And let's talk about this, because I know you actually have personal dealings with trying to go through the usual channels to accomplish a very admirable event or goal, and couldn't get anything doing, so you took the bull by the horns and did it yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, we
tell the folks about that.
It was an unusual circumstance. I had received a phone call shortly after the House of Representatives had set up its resource center in the Capitol.
Which was what?
The resource center was set up for the purpose of being able to categorize and quantify resources that we had being made available to people in Louisiana, and then categorize and prioritize the needs that were arising.
So if someone calls up and says, I need food over here, hopefully someone's called in and said, I've got food
available,
and you put the two
and we're
folks
just trying
together.
to connect the dots in a very expeditious manner.
And this was the House of Representatives?
The House of Representatives.
Okay.
So I was at the House Resource Center manning phones, as many of us were, and I received a personal phone call from someone who lives in Ascension Parish, I believe, and they didn't know who to turn to, and they called me up and asked me if I could help them, and I said, of course. And what's the situation? And the situation was there was millions of pounds of food sitting in a privately owned warehouse, freezer warehouse in outer Jefferson Parish. There was no power. There was a problem because the temperature was beginning to rise, and millions of pounds of food would go bad.
And we're talking about millions of pounds.
Literally millions of pounds of food. We had a 2.5, 3-story refrigerated warehouse with millions of pounds of food sitting in it and going bad. At the same time, we had all the people who had left Jefferson Parish, New Orleans, including our school children, going to schools and living elsewhere and needing to provide those supplies. So it took us to do something very expeditiously to get that food to the people that needed it.
All right, let's talk about on the next segment exactly what you did. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines and Representative Gary Beard. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, pleased to have on the show State Representative Gary Beard. Gary, again, thanks. We're talking about the fact that you get a phone call from somebody saying, I got millions of pounds of food getting ready to spoil in New Orleans. Right. Can you help me? Right. Why was he calling you? Why didn't he call FEMA or somebody else?
From what he had told me over the telephone was that he had tried to contact through the state hierarchy, in the governor's office and elsewhere, trying to get through and could get no response and could get no answers. And people began making phone calls, and someone called me, and I got in touch with a man in Florida who had evacuated to Florida with his family, and he asked me if I could help him out.
So what'd you do?
Well, I told him absolutely, and let's find where our food banks are. Let's find people with trucks. We contacted several people, including Winn-Dixie, who graciously allowed us to use some of their 18-wheelers and some of their freezer space. And we contacted the state police. They provided an escort. At this time, of course, you know all the problem with the looting and the gunfire and everything. Everybody was concerned about it. So the state police provided us an escort. We took 20 trucks down into Jefferson Parish, and we began pulling the food out that was dedicated to, some of it, state food dedicated to the school system in New Orleans, which doesn't exist anymore. and to be able to get that back to Baton Rouge and be distributed back to the school systems where the kids are.
Where'd you find the volunteers to load and unload?
We called everyone that we knew, and we found the forklift operators, again from Winn-Dixie, and others that provided the manpower and the talent and the facilities to.
So just the population jumping in there.
Everybody,
business leaders.
All we needed was someone to be able to open that door of opportunity and bring people together, and we were able to do that. And as strange as it seems, in the middle of this evacuation of food, we were in the warehouse. I got a phone call from someone who I'd never met before, but was running an evacuation center in Lake Charles. And through, I assume through the House Resource Center, he contacted me and said, I have 7,000 people. Now, this was before Rita. And he said, I have 7,000 people here. He said, I'm running out of food. I don't know what to do. We're doing everything we can. Can you help us? And so I looked over in the warehouse, and this 20,000 square foot cavernous warehouse filled with all this food, and all of it ultimately going bad. And so I received a phone call from him, and I contacted one of the manufacturers. We could finally get a line out. Contacted one of the supply companies and the manufacturers of that food product, asked them if they'd be willing to donate it, and they said they would. So we loaded up 80,000 pounds of chicken, and we shipped it via Winn-Dixie's warehouse in Hammond, ultimately to Lake Charles to feed the evacuees that were in the Lake Charles centers. So we were able to do that. Later, we got another phone call the next day. We were able, through Department of Agriculture, actually, to be able to hook up a spare generator and a wiring necessary to run one of the chillers to slow the temperature rise. And received a phone call from East Jeff Hospital saying that they were running out of food and they needed some food. So we made some more phone calls, got another truck loaded up, and brought food to them. So
good stuff.
It worked out in the end. We saved it for our kids and for the people of Louisiana, so it worked out very well. And we appreciate especially the help of Winn-Dixie and others that just jumped in and did a great job of pulling together to get the job done.
But, you know, what's so striking is you had to take the bull by the horns. This wasn't going to happen through what you would expect would be the customary communication.
That's correct. It's, my dad always had a philosophy, the John Wayne philosophy, and I guess it instilled this. It's a lead. You either lead, you follow, or you get the heck out of the way. And in this case, there wasn't a time to waste because the food was going bad. So it was time to get things done.
Let's talk about Baton Rouge, because we have 150, 200,000 more folks here now,
at least
and every component of our infrastructure in this city is maxed out. It was, frankly, in a lot of respects, already maxed out before this happened. What are we going to do? Let's just chop them up. What are we going to do about traffic? I mean, everybody's pulling their hair out.
Right. And you know, that there's one good thing from this I'm starting to see is the people in Baton Rouge have been so patient with our friends and families that are staying with us now, and we know the situation is bad, and we know it's going to get better.
I tell you, the churches and just the whole population
everybody
has kicked in like crazy.
It's been wonderful. There has been an absolute giving of self here in Baton Rouge that I'm so proud of.
But the churches and the population aren't going to fix the roads,
no,
so what do we do?
Well, I'll tell you, the infrastructure is the responsibility of government. That's what government is supposed to do. And one of the functions at any rate. And I find that it was sort of lacking in what was being accomplished. So the Baton Rouge delegation went and met with the governor's office.
When you say lacking, you mean lacking at the state level?
Well, what we found was that the effect of the hurricane was not just on the New Orleans area and now the Lake Charles, Calcasieu area, Cameron, but also in Baton Rouge and in Lafayette and other communities that absorbed the influx of the people of South Louisiana. And the infrastructure isn't sufficient to have that many people dependent upon it. And so we met with the governor's office and we cited our concerns that as we begin to put forth requests for federal assistance, we need to make sure that there are line item appropriations requested for Baton Rouge, for infrastructure development, and for the future of our city, because many people that live here now are not moving back. They're going to be staying here.
So let me understand the flow of money. It's going to come from the federal government to the state government, and from the state government to whoever the state government decides gets it? Unless
it's a line item appropriation that would go straight to the particular governmental entity that needs the assistance for a project-by-project basis.
So in other words, the federal government can decide to give the local government the money directly?
It could be a line item appropriation, and that's what we wanted as Baton Rouge delegation.
Well, are y'all able as a Baton Rouge delegation to bypass the state government and go straight to the federal?
Well, the state told us, the governor's office told us that the infrastructure needs of Baton Rouge would be taken care of by the entrepreneurial spirit.
What does that mean?
I don't really know. I think what they were trying to say was they were hoping that free market enterprise would just kick in and take care of it. Our position, as we expressed in the meeting, was that no, that's not how you solve the problem for Baton Rouge. This is a problem that government needs to kick in and solve, not free market enterprise. We need to have the government building the infrastructure needs that Baton Rouge needs as a community, not only to sustain the population we had, but the increased growth and the future that Baton Rouge is now going to be seeing because of this change. So we disagreed with the governor's office in that respect. And as a delegation, we met with our senators and expressed our concerns.
Talking about the United States
our U.S. senators. Senator Vitter was most open and helpful and in stressing the need for line item appropriations. And what we felt was, in meeting, was that what we needed was a sound plan, engineering plan for our roads, but also our schools, our telecommunication systems, our water systems, our wastewater systems, everything that we need, hospitals, everything that we need to be able to meet the demands and the needs of the people that are living here in East Baton Rouge Parish. And that is the direction we wanted to see as a delegation. And ultimately received the nod, as I understand, from the governor's office to move in that direction, to allow us to request specifically monies for East Baton Rouge.
So that's great news.
So I think that's good news. And as Congress begins to move now in the funding mechanisms that they're now debating, hopefully and prayerfully Baton Rouge will have some line item appropriations there that this administration can use to meet these needs.
Well, let's talk about the funding that's coming, the billions of dollars that's being talked about on the next segment. This is Locke, Meredith, Legal Lines, and Representative Gary Beard. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, pleased to have on the show State Representative Gary Beard. Gary, we were talking about the effects the hurricanes have had on Baton Rouge and how the infrastructure is completely overwhelmed. And I heard that we've got $100 billion coming our way. I know our United States congregation went up there and said they wanted $250 billion, I think. So we're going to get a bunch of money down here, I guess, sooner or later. How do we manage that?
Well, that's a multitask operation, because some of the funds that you'll see be going to the state, some of the funds through line item will probably be going directly to municipal governments. And I think that we have a lot of requests in, but we need to make sure several things. First, that the planning is done in such a way, and the engineering is accomplished in such a way, that what we build isn't simply a rebuilding of the old, but rather what we're building is a foundation for our future, and that what's being accomplished is not just simply taking old structures and putting Band-Aids on them for an analogy.
Make it look good, huh?
To make it look good and paint it up and make it look good, rather than sitting back saying, what's the most cost-effective way of being able to build new in South Louisiana, and at the same time making sure that it's protected, that the people who now live there and work there are protected from these types of catastrophes that could happen in the future.
Well, you're an engineer, and you're proposing, I guess, a lot of folks getting together who are qualified to come up with these plans. Jay Darden was saying the same thing, to make sure that we're spending the money wisely in an appropriate fashion, in a thoughtful manner. Kind of a concern that pops in my head, though, is that takes time, and I imagine a lot of folks are getting nervous that the amount of money that the federal government's willing to send down here to rebuild is going to dry up pretty fast.
I think that over time, this is going to be, truthfully, a multi-year program, could possibly even take a decade. I mean, you're looking at rebuilding levees and flood walls that need to be lengthened, heightened, strengthened, and that's going to take some good, sound engineering time to get that accomplished. And what I'm saying that is over the months to come, as we're debating these funding issues and these funding mechanisms, let's take the time to thoughtfully and carefully sit down and plan out what we build in Louisiana, that we build a foundation filled with hope. Because otherwise, it's woe that'll come in the future, because all we've done is rebuilt what was there and was deficient from the very beginning.
It's interesting, and I was telling Jay Darden earlier, and you're the engineer, I don't understand, are you proposing then that the levee just be rebuilt, taller, stronger, and all of that? Why wouldn't we have another, fallback levee in case one breaks? Isn't that what Holland did?
Well, yeah, they have multiple levee systems.
Why wouldn't we do something like that?
That's what I'm saying. I think we need to take the time to find out first what areas are going to be built again, what areas are not, because I'm sure that's going to happen. And when we do rebuild, how do we rebuild those areas and protect them from these type of events in the future? So I think we need to have a little bit of time to make sure that we're just not wastefully taking money, because this is going to happen once. And once these monies come through, that's all that there'll be. So we need to make sure that we use it wisely. And at the same time, I think we need to give assurances to the people of Louisiana that those firms that are involved in the rebuilding of our state are not so intrinsically woven to the political spectrum that they stand apart from it.
So how are you going to do that?
I think that each and every member of elected public officials should not receive any types of campaign contributions from anybody doing that rebuilding effort over the next few years, so that the people can be assured that the men and women who serve in leadership positions in our state are making the decisions necessary to rebuild a new Louisiana based on sound engineering and planning and absolute quality at the utmost, and not based on anything else that could skew that judgment.
Realistically, though, that wouldn't happen, will it? I mean,
I
can't
hope and pray
see
that it does, because now this is a new day in Louisiana. It is time for new leadership. It is time for people to rise up and say, we don't want the old anymore. What we want and what we expect from our leadership is decisive, thoughtful, timely decisions that are made solely for the best interests for the people of Louisiana, and that we will build up a future filled with hope, not woe, and we will build a new Louisiana that can serve as a beacon of light to other communities.
Gary, I'm really interested in this line item device that seems to exist, because it seems to me that it removes a whole layer of state bureaucracy in the administration of the funds that come from the federal government. The feds aren't just going to give you the money without making you prove to them that you need it, so there's this check and balance. That's happening? I assume every city's going to try and do that, aren't they?
The request has to be made in a way that it's for specific projects and specific needs.
Example, we want to do the South Loop around Baton Rouge. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the engineering. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's the preliminary engineering.
It will cost us $900. In fact, the South Loop, as you may recall, was put in one of the major mega projects that I had put forth in the House of Representatives and the Transportation Committee in the House to build the South Loop in Baton Rouge, along with the hurricane evacuation corridors from South Louisiana.
This was put up by you before the hurricane?
That's correct, before the hurricane, to build hurricane evacuation routes, the mega projects throughout our state to alleviate the transportation woes that we're facing. And in Baton Rouge, I wanted to make sure that the South Loop, which included an exit from the existing South Bridge, a new bridge further downriver, and a loop that covered all southeast Baton Rouge through Ascension up back toward Livingston Parish, tying back into 12. So crossing over 10, over Airline, back to 12, with entrances and exits to be able to move our traffic more freely. And we put that through in House Transportation Committee with the request that the people of Louisiana vote on it. What I said was, let's not impose any new taxes on the people of Louisiana. And I don't think that this catastrophe in South Louisiana requires new taxes. We should, in fact, restrain from spending, as we should have last session.
Use the money they already got.
Use the money we already have, rededicate our funds to those purposes. And so last session I tried to do that, to go back to the vote of the people and say, let's take existing gasoline tax money, dedicate that monies to the infrastructure projects that I just listed out.
So what happened?
The administration opposed it, and it died by a 9-8 vote in committee.
And what was the rationale for the opposition?
You know what, I truly, other than politics, I can't find any rationale, because what I was asking was that the people of Louisiana would vote on how to spend their tax dollars. Because if we took $200 million a year out of our tax funds and we bonded that money at these low interest rates that we have available now, we could have built over $4 billion worth of roads throughout our state.
Gary, you know what's so interesting is, it seems to me that we now have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to not even have to redirect our own local monies.
That's correct.
We can use the federal monies that are going to be sent down here, and all the work's already been done.
That's correct.
All the engineering, all the planning is there.
That's what I'm saying. So these projects that we want to build that would effectively renew our state and give us a great foundation to build from for the future, we can take those projects that we already know that we need, request line item appropriations from the federal government to build those particular projects that would serve East Baton Rouge Parish, in fact, would serve our whole state.
Truly once-in-a-lifetime
once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Gary, thank you so much for being on the show. I look forward to getting you back in here and seeing how we're doing.
Sounds great.
This is Locke, Meredith, Legal Lines. State Representative Gary Beard, thank you for being with us.